The story of the modern Chargers doesn't begin with Jim Harbaugh's arrival, or even with a playoff run. It begins with uncertainty. April 2020, Philip Rivers, the steady hand who guided a generation of Chargers football, was gone. For years, his legacy was one of near misses, fiery competitiveness, and heartbreaks that became routine. The franchise stood frozen. Double down on the past or gamble on a future no one could quite see. With the 6th pick, they chose a quarterback who many believed wasn't ready, Justin Herbert. That single draft card set off a chain reaction. Years of dazzling stats paired with inexplicable collapses, a head coach whose risks became infamous, and finally, the cultural reset under Harbaugh. From that draft night forward, every win, every loss, every turning point has led back to that one decision. Herbert wasn't just a draft pick. He was the hinge of the team's future. This is the untold story behind the single decision that saved the Los Angeles Chargers. Why would a franchise stake everything on a quarterback so many evaluators believed carried real uncertainty? To understand that, it helps to look at the choice they faced in 2020. Philip Rivers had defined the Chargers for 16 years. Durable, passionate, and relentlessly consistent. He gave the team steady quarterback play, but not the postseason breakthroughs they needed. For all his production, the ceiling was clear. Reliability hadn't translated into championships. That context is why Justin Herbert became more than just another draft pick. Coming out of Oregon, his traits were obvious. 6'6", powerful arm, the ability to move outside of the pocket. What wasn't obvious was how those tools would translate against NFL defenses. Scouts flagged questions about his accuracy, processing speed under pressure, and whether his quieter personality could command a professional locker room. An AFC scout at the time summed it up clearly. The physical traits weren't in doubt, but whether he could clean up the precision and decision-making would decide everything. Uncertainty definitely defined his profile. The Chargers stood at a fork in the road. On one side, another version of stability, finding a veteran or bridge quarterback to carry them forward at a baseline level. On the other hand, Herbert, whose career outcomes ranged anywhere from superstar to bust. Choosing Herbert was stepping into the unknown. The Chargers chose the upside. What followed was one of the sharpest validations of a draft gamble in recent memory. Herbert's rookie season was not just strong, it was historic. He threw for 4,336 yards and 31 touchdown passes. Absolutely shattering rookie benchmarks while being thrust into the lineup earlier than planned after Tyrod Taylor's injury. He recorded 6 different 300-yard games, another rookie record, and did so while learning on the fly. Far from being a developmental year, his debut season announced him as one of the league's brightest young quarterbacks. By year's end, he was named NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year. In that single season, Herbert justified the Chargers' jump into uncertainty. The flaws scouts worried about didn't prevent him from producing at a level veterans rarely reach. The gamble turned into one of the most impressive first-year returns of the modern draft era. For a franchise teetering on irrelevance after Rivers, Herbert was the bridge back into national relevance. But a question lingered beneath all the record-setting numbers. If Herbert was playing at this level, why weren't the Chargers winning? The team stumbled through narrow defeats, late collapses, and the same struggles that define the Rivers era. While Herbert broke statistical records once held by Andrew Luck and Dan Marino, the wider perception of the Chargers was murkier. They had found their star, but the franchise itself still looked directionless. This paradox defined the early Herbert years. The Chargers had struck gold at the most important position, yet they still couldn't cash in. Analysts debated whether Herbert's brilliance would be sustainable against the defenses that now had film on him. Some worried if organizational leadership didn't catch up, the talent might be wasted. For fans, the frustration felt familiar. History repeating itself, even with a new face under center. Yet Herbert's experience still altered the trajectory of the entire organization. No matter what else was broken, the quarterback question, the one that haunts most franchises for decades, was answered. That alone would give the team relevance, and it reset expectations for what came next. If they could build correctly, Herbert gave them a new championship window. And this is where the story takes a turn. Drafting Herbert solved one problem, but it created an urgency for the next. Finding leadership capable of maximizing him. Because what followed wasn't consistent playoff success, but a stretch defined by squandered potential and leadership failures that kept the Chargers stuck in the same frustrations. The defining period that followed was the Brandon Staley era, a stretch remembered less for innovation and more for collapse. When Staley was hired in 2021, he was framed as a defensive savant fresh off coordinating the Rams' top-ranked unit. The idea was straightforward. Pair Justin Herbert's rising talent with a coach who could finally deliver a reliable defense. What unfolded instead was inconsistency, mismanagement, and losses that etched themselves into franchise infamy. From the start, Staley stood out for his data-driven game management. He leaned on analytics to justify aggressive fourth down attempts in situations where most coaches would punt. Sometimes the boldness paid off, catching defenses flat-footed, but just as often the gambles backfired, leaving the Chargers' defense in short fields or pulling momentum away from Herbert and the offense. These moments became a trademark of his tenure. High-risk decisions that symbolized conviction in theory, but left fans and players questioning judgment in practice. The most glaring example of his shortcomings came in January 2023, during a wild-card game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Chargers built a commanding 27-0 shutout lead in the first half. Everything appeared in their control. Yet, in a collapse that shocked the league, Trevor Lawrence threw 4 touchdown passes in the second half, and Los Angeles gave up one of the most improbable comebacks in NFL postseason history. The Jaguars won 31-30. It was officially the third largest comeback in playoff history, but for the Chargers, it was something worse. A public indictment on their head coach. Staley, who not only led the team but also called the defense, absorbed the full weight of the fallout. Failure on Staley's supposed strength only magnified the frustration. Year after year, despite significant investments in free agents and draft picks, the defense never ranked above mediocrity. As late of Week 15 in 2023, the Chargers were 29th in yards allowed and 27th in points allowed, numbers that made them one of the league's worst units. For a coach hired specifically for defensive expertise, this was a glaring contradiction. His schemes often lack consistency, with game plans either shifting dramatically or refusing to adapt at key moments, and opponents repeatedly exploited these cracks. The problems weren't confined to the field. By 2023, reports surfaced of a growing disconnect inside the locker room. Multiple team sources described frustrated players in a fractured environment, where leadership and communication often fell short. The unity that should have sustained a team built around its franchise quarterback was fading. When losing piled on top of internal division, the organization's foundations appeared weaker week by week. The final unraveling came in December 2023 against the Las Vegas Raiders. Facing an interim staff and a rookie quarterback, the Chargers endured what many called the lowest point in franchise history. The Chargers dropped this game by an astounding 63-21 final score. The humiliation was complete. A team fighting for respect was exposed nationally in one of the worst performances ever seen. That blowout, combined with the playoff collapse of a year earlier, formed bookends on an era that had spiraled beyond saving. Even Herbert's production dipped under these conditions. By the end of 2023, the quarterback who once shattered rookie records had hit career lows in passing yards per game, completion percentage, and team scoring output. It wasn't a decline in talent, but the byproduct of an organization struggling to align its star with a coherent system. The disconnect between player potential and team performance was now undeniable. Ownership acted swiftly. The day after the Raiders' defeat, Brandon Staley and general manager Tom Telesco were fired. In explaining the decision, owner Dean Spanos made clear that continuity for its own sake was not an option. The lessons of repeated failure demanded change, and the search for leadership that could finally elevate Herbert into contention had to begin. That choice opened up the door for the next chapter, one where the focus shifted from dysfunction to the challenge of rebuilding culture and identity. The next coach would not only steady the franchise, but also answer a larger question. What does it take to transform wasted potential into a contender? In January 2024, the Chargers hired Jim Harbaugh, a move that immediately signaled a change in direction. His resume spoke for itself. 3 straight NFC Championship games and a Super Bowl appearance with the 49ers, all followed by transforming Michigan into a national title contender. But bringing that success formula to Los Angeles wasn't guaranteed. Harbaugh had long been known for his physical, disciplined approach built around the run game, which sat in contrast to Justin Herbert's explosive, pass-first skill set. The question lingered. Can an old-school coach and a modern quarterback actually work together? Early skepticism centered around pace and style. Critics assumed Harbaugh might limit Herbert, turning him into more of a game manager while the offense leaned on ball control and defense. Questions built around play calling freedom and creativity circulated before he even coached a game, but that narrative shifted once he arrived. Practices grew sharper, discipline tightened, and penalties dropped noticeably. Players like Rashawn Slater described a culture that was just really built around ball, with distractions cut down to nothing. A team that had felt disconnected under Staley now carried itself with visible focus and collective purpose. One of Harbaugh's first structural changes was up front. Too often in previous years, Herbert had been left to escape collapsing pockets, but Harbaugh emphasized line play and physical leverage. The running game wasn't asked to dominate by sheer volume. Instead, it was used to create balance and soften defenses. With that platform, Herbert could survey the field without constant pressure. The offensive line's tougher edge became the launching point for a more expansive passing attack, one that let Herbert show why he was considered among the league's top talents. The results showed almost immediately. In Harbaugh's first season, the Chargers returned to the playoffs, shedding a habit of losing close games. Instead of collapsing in the fourth quarter, they began finishing strong. A wild card win over Denver symbolized a shift. Resilience had replaced fragility, and Herbert was no longer forced to cover for systemic cracks on his own. Their postseason push ended in the divisional round. But for the first time in years, the franchise looked structured, disciplined, and capable of belonging in the playoffs. Still, Harbaugh's philosophy remained in question. Would he stick too rigidly to a throwback style? By 2025, the adjustments became clear. He preserved his physical standards, demanding toughness in the trenches, but also rebalanced his play calling to emphasize Herbert's arm. Deep throws and aggressive concepts returned to the forefront. Rather than asking Herbert to guide the flow of the game cautiously, Harbaugh asked him to dictate it. The combination of power football and downfield passing created a far more dangerous offense. The evidence arrived in the opening stretch of the 2025 season. In his first two games, Herbert completed 72% of his passes with 560 yards, 5 touchdowns, and no interceptions. Those numbers confirmed the offense was no longer holding him back. Skeptics who worried about an awkward fit between Harbaugh and Herbert began to reconsider. By adapting without abandoning his core principles, Harbaugh had found a balance. Toughness up front paired with an unleashed aerial attack. Yet, what separated Harbaugh's impact from a simple scheme change was the culture he built. Accountability replaced the excuses. Cohesion replaced disunity. And the team's posture in critical moments shifted. Close games no longer unraveled at the seams. And Herbert's production finally translated into meaningful wins. The hire wasn't just about unrolling a new playbook. It was about reshaping how the Chargers operated day to day. Through one full season and into the next, the franchise looked different. More physical, more disciplined, and more unified. Herbert remained the same gifted quarterback, but under Harbaugh, his talent was placed inside a structure that amplified it instead of wasting it. The cultural reset gave the Chargers the tools to turn statistics into substance. And with those foundations in place, the story of this team no longer revolved around chaos or collapse. It became about the decision years earlier that set all of this in motion. For Los Angeles, the past few years have shown how quickly direction can shift. The combination of drafting Justin Herbert and hiring Jim Harbaugh has turned the Chargers from a team of wasted chances into one with structure and belief. Herbert was the hinge, and Harbaugh supplied the hands to turn it. The arc is clear. Herbert's 4,336 yards and 31 touchdowns as a rookie set the stage. And by January 2024, Harbaugh returned them to the playoffs in his first season. The franchise finally looks like a Super Bowl contender if culture and performance can stay aligned. So now we turn it over to you. Was drafting Herbert the greatest decision of this era? Or was Harbaugh truly the missing piece? Or maybe a little combination of both? Drop your takes in the comments below. And if you like this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our future uploads. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.